Hello and welcome to $0 Productions. New show, title not pending. That's right, I'm doing a different show today and you didn't even see it coming. Well, it's mostly the same show, it's just that I'm going to do something different. Instead of a top 5 this week, I'm actually going to do a theory video on The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild's placement in the official timeline. So I'm going to go over a few theories here. If you will turn your sacred book of history, or perhaps just regular shiny book of history, to page 69. like for real. It's on page 69. I cannot make this up. Well, I could, but it wouldn't be as funny if it wasn't true. So anyways, we're going to go over a couple of timeline theories here. Starting with right here, after the world's lousiest Zelda game. Zelda 2, as much as I hate it, is actually one of the series' most interesting ones for lore, because it comes directly after Zelda 1, so you think it's probably got the same Link and the same Princess Zelda, but you're only half right. If you've actually read through the official timeline, it's actually the first Princess Zelda, which is not the Princess Zelda in Zelda 1, oddly enough. This Princess Zelda had been cursed to sleep for untold long time, which some people seem to remember for some reason as being 100 years, so everybody keeps thinking of that, alluding to Breath of the Wild. However, as far as I can tell, there's no place in the canon where it actually says 100 years. It just says she's been sleeping for a long time. So we're going to kind of throw that out. But I think this would be an interesting place to put it, right in The Legend of Zelda 2. Basically, the plot of that game is that some of Ganon's minions are coming back to try and kill Link and use his blood to complete a magical spell to resurrect Ganon. And if you remember, if you played that game, then you probably saw the game over screen a lot for no reason. And the game over screen was Ganon, like, laughing at you and resurrected, and it actually said Link is dead, the return of Ganon has come, or something along those lines. And I think that would be an interesting place to split the timeline again, because it actually technically is in canon. In a Zelda game, it's strictly said that after Zelda 2, Ganon was restored, if you consider the game over screen to be canon, which, for the purpose of this theory, I'm going to. So that's kind of interesting idea to me, to kind of split the canon again, although it's kind of weird because that's basically the reason that the canon split into the hero is defeated timeline over here in the first place. So that would mean twice in this timeline that Link was defeated by Ganon and or his followers. But anyways, moving on, I'm going to go over another idea coming in the next timeline, and after Four Swords Adventures. Now, that's another kind of an interesting thing. This timeline is actually the heaviest Sheikah influence, which, as we've seen so far from Breath of the Wild, there's a lot of Sheikah influence in this game. The most Sheikah-heavy game so far has been Twilight Princess, and going further into that, the Sheikah are obviously, like, all over the place now. You know, as far as we can tell, they're the most prolific race we've seen from the gameplay so far. So there's obviously going to be a lot of story emphasis on the Sheikah. I think we're going to get a lot of background into that, and I think some of that background is going to be the unexplored part of what was in Twilight Princess. Why were they all wiped out before even Ocarina of Time? Most of them were scattered few and far between, and now in Twilight Princess they all had these little hidden villages, but there was, as far as we can tell, only one left in Hyrule. So what happened to them? We're going to explore that as we go through Breath of the Wild, obviously, and that's going to be some interesting stuff. Also, in Four Swords Adventures, there's another possibility for a timeline split, because at the beginning of the game, Four Swords Adventures is actually the last game in this timeline so far. And the importance of that is that that's where I think the timeline split could happen again, is actually at the end of the timeline, once again. The end of the current timeline, as it were. So, if it were to split there, it would kind of make sense, because this is at the point when Ganondorf was reincarnated after he was killed at the end of Twilight Princess. And so Ganon could now rise to power again, but in addition to Ganondorf being there, he teamed up with the Wind Sorcerer, Vati, who just adding his power to Ganon's would be pretty close to impossible for Link to defeat, because in order for him to defeat each one of them successfully, that was basically impossible. If they had actually worked together more in that game, then it would have been a lot tougher to get through the game if it was possible at all, because fighting both of those bosses at once would have been quite a challenge. Anyways, we're going to move on to another kind of a theory, which is not quite at the end, but it sort of is. Now, a lot of people have been putting this game after the Wind Waker, which kind of makes sense, because you're seeing in the Breath of the Wild gameplay the Koroks have returned, and so everybody's taking that and saying, oh, there's the Koroks, that means it has to be in this timeline. But I don't think that's necessarily true, because the Koroks are basically just a transformation of the Kokiri after their need changed. Because basically the only reason they exist is to basically be servants of the Deku Tree, and if the Deku Tree needed them to change for any reason, he could change them into Koroks. So I don't see why he couldn't have 2 or 3 alternate futures where he made Koroks. So I don't think Koroks being in the game strictly eliminates the other 2 timelines. So we're going to go with this idea, and this is actually another place where the timeline gets split. That's one of the things that I'm not actually as fond of with all these theories, is that they involve the timeline splitting again inside of one of the timeline splits or the other, but I'll get to why I think this could be interesting in just a moment. So there is more evidence than that to prove this could be after the Wind Waker, though. We do see that I think a few different people found this old salt. It's just a random pickup item from like enemies and just random places in tops of the mountains. They're finding this salt, and when you pick it up, it describes it as being from an ancient sea that possibly could have once covered the entire world. So that's an interesting. There's a lot to take from that, and that I think goes 100 times further to proving that it's in this timeline than the Koroks do at all, if the Koroks even really have anything to do with it. But not discounting the other 2 timelines, anyways. I completely forgot about today's beer of the week, which is last week's beer of the week, because I didn't finish the growler, which is bad of me. If you didn't finish your growler, then shame on you. Drink the rest of it now, because in a week it may be slightly sour. Still okay. Also today, I'm drinking Whaler's rum, because I didn't have a lot of that beer left. This rum is okay. It's inexpensive, and it tastes like dark rum. So pick that up if you are so inclined. So anyway, the next possible timeline split being in Wind Waker that I'm theorizing would be actually right at the end of Wind Waker. Right when you're about to have the final battle with Ganon. He's about to touch the Triforce, and the King of Hyrule, King Daphnis, comes in and touches the Triforce before him and gets his wish granted. Now what if Ganon touched the Triforce, got his wish granted? That would be for Hyrule to be unflooded, basically, and return to being his kingdom. At that point, he could probably rise to the former power that was Ganon instead of Ganondorf. Could probably easily just slay Link and Zelda there and steal their Triforces, at which point in Breath of the Wild, Ganon could have all 3 parts of the Triforce. And that would be pretty nuts as a boss fight, and I would be excited to see that. But anyways, having a timeline split in all three of these games is very interesting to me because of my next part of my theory, a different placement for it instead of the end of any timeline, or close to the end, because it would be close to the end with Wind Waker. It would probably be in a separate timeline alongside Phantom Hourglass or Spirit Tracks under that theory. But instead of those, my other theory is perhaps way up here, before Skyward Sword even. Now, in Skyward Sword, one of the recurring themes that we saw all over the world was technology that had been dead, sitting there for possibly centuries without anybody touching it. And one of the big themes that we're seeing in Breath of the Wild is technology that is living. What if that technology that was so great was on Earth at that point, and then basically the Calamity Ganon came and more or less just raised everything that was the Earth, and, you know, the Hylians ascended to the sky, like is in the legend, and then what happens next? This, I think, could be the story of the Link, perhaps, that falls to Ganon, and at that point the Hylians have to go up to the sky. Or perhaps it's a Link that was there to seal Ganon away in the first place, which would kind of imply that Ganon and Demise were in fact the same being, which I'm not going to go into that too much because there's plenty of theories on that, and it's fairly likely that they're related in some way. But if Ganon and Demise are the same being, and this is the Link that sealed him away, perhaps he'll meet a martyr's fate at the end of the game, which would be just a crazy turn of events for any kind of thing. I think I'd like to see that just because it'd be like a really shocking, like for, not for me, because I've already kind of, if this actually happens, I'll be like, called it, but for everybody else, that'd just be like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Like, that'd probably have a little bit of that effect for me, even though I'm saying this right now. But I think that could be one of the coolest points for a Zelda story ever, if Link was the martyr that sacrificed himself in order to protect Hyrule and seal away this demon that had been plaguing the lower lands so that Skyward Sword could even happen. There is where my theories will all come together, though. Because what if instead of the timeline coming here, and then splitting 3 times, and then ending 3 times, what if the timeline continued one timeline down here, and then Breath of the Wild was after the adventure of Link, and at the start, creating a cyclical timeline. Under here, Link does whatever he does. The world is pretty much destroyed, but it's still there. And then comes back to Skyward Sword afterward. Now, a lot of you are probably going to read me this paragraph right here to dispute this, which says, the chronology begins with the creation of heaven and earth, immediately followed by the events of Skyward Sword. So, my response to that is that it doesn't specifically say that the world begins there. It just says that heaven and earth are created. If heaven and earth are destroyed or broken beyond recognition, they may have to be made anew by the goddesses or, what have you, whether it's Din Nayru and Farore or just Hylia herself, depending on which way they end up doing that. I think it's kind of interesting how each Zelda game has its own little religion that's a little different from all the other games. But anyways, I think it would be totally cool if that would actually put all these games in a straight line, because it would basically be a straight line starting at Skyward Sword, going through the Adventure of Link, going back to Skyward Sword, through Four Swords Adventures, back to Skyward Sword, and down through Spirit Tracks. Or perhaps starting over again if there is a split over here, because my theory kind of would require that. So that'd pretty much be 4 times through Skyward Sword and Ocarina of Time and all of them throughout the history of Hyrule as we know it. And that's just my thoughts. This is just a theory, so don't read too much into it. It's probably completely wrong, but your theory is probably completely wrong too. So, we're just having fun here. Let me know what you think about my theory in the comments below. Let me hear where you put your thing. I have to drink now because I messed up. Got my Zelda cup. Dangerous to drink alone. It's been in my cupboard for a while now. It kind of burns going down. Whew. I don't usually chase stuff. Anyways, be sure to like and share and all that good stuff so that we can get more people in on this conversation with us. This has been a title not pending episode of the production company $0 Productions. It's not really a company. It's just me. Anyways, I don't know. I think I should have a worse joke than I had last week to go out on.